So to finish the subject of the sewing machine, they became probably the most popular type of a wedding present, and here I even have an advertisement to show you of the single machine, showing a newlywed couple being very happy because they can now enjoy proper domestic life with the sewing machine. In some older houses you may still find those machines, or they are converted into little tables. I remember my grandmother used to have one like that, like one in one of the pictures here, with metal legs and a wooden table top. So they were really very popular. And what else about the servants and the poor wearing the clothes? So of course what they would mostly wear is second-hand clothes. So they couldn't really think of having the clothes new and made to measure, or most of them could not even afford the ready-made clothes. But increasingly there is a tendency among the poorer sections of the Victorian society to at least try to follow the fashion. It's very visible, especially in the second half of the 19th century, when of course fashionable dresses are very elaborate and very expensive, but there is a big market for accessories. And I'd like to show you two images. One is from 1862. This is a painting, a contemporary painting by one of the Pre-Raphaelites, John Everett Miller. It shows a couple. It doesn't really matter what situation is depicted here, whether it's a husband and wife or a daughter and father. Anyway, what I would like to draw your attention to is the decorative velvet hairnet that the woman is wearing on her hair to keep her hair in place. And another image is from 1874, and it shows the dinner hour at a factory. So young women working at the factory have an hour off for rest and lunch. And if you look closer, you can see that many of these women actually wear very similar hairnets as this evidently rich woman from the previous image. So within a decade, this fashion, this accessory would go down the social scale. And this is something very frequently observed in the 19th century, something that starts as a fashion for the rich, gradually, sometimes within years, later, with the accelerating pace of fashion, within months, goes down the social scale and starts being adopted by servants. Here we have some cartoons making fun of the alleged pretensions of the servants. They all come from the Punch magazine, a very popular London magazine, satirical magazine, mostly by middle-class men, for middle-class men. So they very often make fun of women and servants and fashions and such things. So here we have some images. First few show a young housemaid wearing a crinoline. She bought herself a fashionable dress supported by a crinoline. If you look and compare the crinoline worn by the servant and the one worn by the lady, you can see the difference straight away, because the crinoline worn by the servant first of all is shorter, so you can see her feet, and no lady would be seen with her feet showing from beneath her skirt. The other thing, you can see the hoops, you can see the construction beneath the skirt, and this was extremely unladylike, so it really indicates the low social status of this young servant. And of course she is reprimanded by her employer for mimicking the fashions of her social superiors. So the lady can wear her crinoline, but the servant needs to explain herself. And in the other picture from 1864, so this is when the crinoline was at the height of its fashion, we have this poor servant wearing a crinoline, overturning the objects in the living room and causing havoc. She was supposed to clean the room, and she made an even bigger mess with her crinoline. There is another funny cartoon from 1866 when we have again a similar scene of a young cheeky servant being reprimanded, but this time she is reprimanded for not wearing her crinoline. So the housekeepers here, this respectable looking elder lady, asks, "Where is your crinoline?" And the cheeky young housemaid answers, "I heard they were going out of fashion." So now the servant, who was supposed to be seen by the guests especially, was supposed to wear the crinoline to indicate perhaps the status of the employer rather than her own taste in fashion. The following two cartoons from Punch relate to other aspects of fashion. Here we have one conversation between two servants, the cook and the housemaid, and the cook is quite surprised to find the housemaid wearing a fashionable dress with a long train. And the housemaid says, "Of course I wear a fashionable dress because I am seen by the delivery man. So I want to look fashionable." The last one from the Belle Époque period shows a job interview, and here we have a woman who wants to be employed as a cook, and she comes to the interview ridiculously overdressed. So this was, of course, the way of the class of the employers ridiculing or scolding their servants. But if we look at the images that do not really show, that they're not meant to be humorous, but they show the reality of life, you can see, for example, in this painting from 1864, two young servants, two maids of all work, so rather junior servants in the household. And if you look close, they have crinoline skirts. They have their dresses supported on a frame to give them more volume. Later, towards the end of the 19th century and in the Edwardian period, it became quite popular for the employers to provide working uniforms for the servants, so the servants would never be taken for anything better than they were. So here we have some images and a photograph of a servant wearing a uniform, and even a page from a magazine selling such uniforms for servants. And this brings us to the subject of fashion magazines, and we will continue in a moment.